say a story. Once there was a couple. The wife was a very pious, religious woman. The shul, synagogue the whole time. She always studied and prayed. And her husband was a self-declared atheist. A very strong believer in evolution, etc., etc. So once they had a child, the child comes to his mother and says, "Mom, where do we come from?" So she says, we come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, King David. So he says, "Yeah, but Dad told me we come from the apes." So he said, "That's from his side of the family." Human beings are very, very sophisticated creatures, like we all know. We are sometimes find ourselves to be very inconsistent with what we believe we should be. Sometimes we're surprised, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we don't even realize that for a while. And as we discussed in the introduction, the book, the Tanya, this holy and special book, addresses spiritual problems, spiritual ailings that people may have, and it leads us chapter after chapter. It's a whole system, a whole plan of how one could make himself be consistent with his belief system, with what he believes is right, which is following the will of Hashem in matters that relate between man and God, and matters between man and his fellow man or woman. And the foundation of how to deal with all these different problems, the Tanya discusses everything from depression, improper thoughts, joy, love and fear of God, self-discipline, many very important aspects that a person needs to live a life in general, and especially a life which is dictated by the Torah, Jewish life. So these are all matters which are going to be discussed, but in order to understand, the first thing is we're going to do some anatomy. We're going to study who we are. And we're going to discover that we have two sides. One side of us is very ugly, the other side of us is very beautiful. And our job and our mission in life is to have the ugly side, or the not so pretty side, let's say, we try to use more positive terms, called selfish, and not be the leader. It's there for a reason, we have to know how to use it, that selfishness. But the trick is to be in control. Now when we're in control, although we don't necessarily get rid of all our negativity, but at least we don't let it show and don't let it act. Not enough not to let it show. We don't want it to be there. It's there, but we have to keep it in control. Think of an ox, which is could be very, very wild, especially when it's in the ring. And our job is to control it, to tame it, and not only we don't have to get rid of it, but we have to use it. Now we have machines, so we don't really appreciate this mashal, this parable of the ox. But in the olden days, before they had combines and tractors, so you had two options of how to make bread or any vegetable, anything to grow. You could have plowed yourself. That would take you, let's say, 2 acres would take you 2 months. And if you could take an ox, if you just know how to get it in control and know what it's doing, you could plow 2 acres in 2 hours. And that's the trick, to take what we're going to call the animal soul and have it controlled by the godly soul. And that way we could accomplish a lot in this world. We can become very good people that God is happy with. And one of the ways to know if Hashem is happy with you, if God is happy with you, is if other people, fellow people, are also enjoy being in your surrounding, enjoy your company. So I want to begin with an interesting story. There is a Chabad rabbi, a shaliach in Vienna. His name is Rabbi Biederman, I think. And he was once sitting in his office. a couple, 10, 20, 15 or 20 years, something like that, 10 or 15 years ago, and a woman comes into his office, elderly woman, and she says, you think you're the Lubavitcher Rebbe's first emissary to Vienna. You should know that long before you ever thought of coming over here, maybe even before you were born, the Rebbe sent me here on a special mission. What was the story? The story was like this. Her family was honored in a dinner for one of a Chabad institution, a yeshiva I believe, and before the dinner they were invited to meet the Rebbe, and she happened to be a Holocaust survivor who escaped Vienna just about on time, or maybe she's I'm not sure if she's a survivor, but she lived in Vienna before the war, and she was saved miraculously. And she had a lot of baggage, like many Holocaust survivors had. And when she met the Rebbe, she felt the Rebbe spoke to her and her family, and the Rebbe alleviated her of a lot of her stress and pain over the Holocaust. And in the end, she told the Rebbe that she actually plans to visit her hometown where she grew up. She plans to visit Vienna, and the Rebbe gave her a mission. The Rebbe told her, I want you to go to a certain doctor, Viktor Frankl, and tell him in my name that his work is very, very important. You should continue it. The spirit shouldn't give up hope. She did the mission. She came to Vienna. She tried to find Dr. Viktor Frankl, and she looked around in the different institutions, universities, and so on, and she found a certain institution where Dr. Frankl worked, was employed as a professor. But they told her that Dr. Frankl actually hasn't come to the college for quite a few weeks. And she did some research. She found where he lived. She knocked on the door of his home, and a woman opens up the door. She asks, "Is Dr. Frankl here?" And he comes over to the door. He looked like he hasn't eaten or slept properly for quite a few weeks. Very pale, very unwell. And she tells him, I have a message for you from the Lubavitcher Rebbe from Brooklyn. He says, keep up your work, don't give up hope, and you will succeed eventually. His face lit up and he thanked her and closed the door, and that was the end of the story. But that's the story that she told Rabbi Biderman. This is my mission. I was the first shaliach, the first emissary to Vienna. And Dr. Biderman did some research behind the story. Dr. Frankl was still alive at the time. Dr. Frankl was a very big psychotherapist. Is that what they call it?
Psychiatrist. He was a therapist.
Psychiatrist. Yeah. And he was still alive at the time. I don't know when he passed away. 20 years ago or so, 96, 97. And he did some research, and this is the story behind the story, is that Dr. Frankl was a Jew. He was a student of Dr. Freud, which was also a Jew. But unlike Dr. Freud, he had a very different opinion on how human beings conduct themselves, what makes people find happiness, and makes them feel good and accomplished. Dr. Freud really believed that we are very, very, very sophisticated animals, and maybe even more animalistic than most animals. And he believed that a way for a person to find happiness, all the depression, all the hardships come when a person doesn't fulfill all his dark desires, and happiness comes when a person does fulfill it. And so that's pretty much what he believed. And that was, all psychologists believe the same way for many years. Dr. Frankl was a colleague of his, a student actually, a disciple of his, and after he went through the war, he was in the camps, I don't know if in Auschwitz or in a different camp, and he discovered a different type of person over there, and that actually helped him form his school of thought in modern psychology, which actually believed that what makes a person happy most is when he finds meaning in his life. He doesn't live for himself, he lives for a higher purpose. So he wrote a book. So before we got to the book, at the time this story happens, it's probably, I believe it's the early 60s, he was teaching his theory of psychology, and most of his colleagues disagreed with him very, very fiercely. In fact, he was ridiculed in the academic circles in Vienna, and at the time this woman comes with a message of the Rebbe, he actually decided to quit. He already had visas to Australia, was going to move and drop this whole field and get on with his life. He was very depressed. He was trying, and no one was listening to his, it wasn't that people disagreed with him, no one even considered it. And at the height of his depression, when he's about to drop everything, the Rebbe sends him this message. And a little while later, he releases a book, it's first in German, called Man's Search for Meaning, which is part of it, the first half of it is actually a memoir of his experiences in the death camps and different types of people that he saw there. He saw some people which actually behaved very animalistic. People would fight over a mouse, over, that's how bad things were. We can't blame them. And he also met some religious Jews over there that, despite all the hardships, were very, very noble. And although the Nazis tried to rob them of their humanity, of their dignity, they robbed them of everything else, but not of their dignity. And this helped him shape his philosophy that people are good deep down. We may behave animalistically sometimes, but we are good, and actually what makes a person happiest in life is his search for meaning, and when he finds that meaning and he lives by that. Rabbi Bitterman actually says that he did a mailing of a calendar, a Jewish calendar to all the Jewish community in Vienna, and he would, for quite a few years, he would get, Dr. Frankel was on the mailing list, and he would get a check from him. One time he gave him a call, and he asked him, "Do you know of the Lubavitcher Rebbe?" So he told him in German that, yes, I definitely do, and I owe him a lot. Whoever wants to watch the video, it's online. Dr. Rabbi Bitterman relates the story, and he has all the details over there. A little more correct, I don't remember exactly, but that's the gist of the story. And that book was translated. The second part of the book is his theory, his psychology of how people work and how people could feel better. And his book, actually, after it was released, was translated to many languages. He became a very, very famous professor, Dr. Viktor Frankl, world-renowned. And his psychology is definitely used, and we could decide what which form we relate to better. Is what makes us happy, living up to all our desires, or living up to a higher purpose. So who's right, Frankl or Freud? Yeah. So like the mother told the child, it depends from whose side. They are both talking about observing a reality. Both realities are true. Not that some people live this way and some people live the other way. All of us have moments in which we could be really disgusted of ourselves, of how animalistic we think or behave or want to behave. Sometimes, hopefully we have certain limits. We don't show everyone what we, it's a good thing that our thoughts are kept private. Imagine if all our thoughts were broadcasted on a loudspeaker. That wouldn't feel so appealing. So we have that choice to make, to live. What makes us happy is living for a purpose, or what makes us happy is chair?
Yeah.
Get your chair, sit comfortable.
You don't want a chair?
He wants a chair.
Plenty of chairs. I'll put it through just in case.
Chair.
I'll put it through the next person.
You take out two.
Maybe move up the table a bit.
That's a famous story, by the way, about the Rebbe and Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, it's a famous story. We don't say stories just to relate history, we say stories to take a lesson.
He died in September of 97.
97 was okay, I got it pretty right. So long before Dr. Ford and Dr. Frankel had this disagreement, there were other great people, great Jewish sages who observed these two different types of people. You could call it almost schizophrenic, except that schizophrenic is when you're living in one reality, you think so. You're not aware of the other one, or you live in the other one, you're not aware of the first. Split personality, but here we have a split personality that we experience momentarily, simultaneously at the same time. We are living, that's the constant battle that we have going on inside of us. Should I give in to my desires, or should I do what's right? And the conclusion that the Arizal was a great Kabbalist, and all Kabbalah today, although with different disagreements, schools of thought within Kabbalah, which is the inner workings of the world, of the person, and to a certain extent also of God, although we can't really say inner workings, outer workings of God, but that's the Arizal. He already made this observation, and actually it's actually founded in the Torah, and in the written Torah, that if there's a verse that says, "I have created souls." Now you could read this verse in a simple meaning that God created many souls. I have a soul, you have a soul, we all have souls. But that's pretty obvious. And the way that Arizal learns, I created souls, is that every person was created with two souls. Actually a third soul, which we'll touch on, which is actually the decision maker. There's two souls, there are two opinions within us. One tells us to do what we enjoy, the other one tells us to do what's right. And then there's us, myself. I have to decide which way to go. And the Jewish philosophers call this the three souls. In Tanya he discusses mainly the two souls, and the third soul is the person who has to make the decision. He doesn't really give it a name, but in other works of Hasidic thought and Kabbalistic thought, Jewish philosophical thought, there is a third name. There is what's called, I'll say it in Hebrew and translate, Nefesh Elokit, a godly soul, Nefesh Be'amit, an animalistic soul, and Nefesh HaSichlit, a intellectual soul or human soul. Now, a human soul doesn't mean necessarily godly. A human soul could choose to behave selfishly, it could choose to behave selflessly, but it has the choice. The godly soul does not have free choice. The animal soul also doesn't have free choice. Animal soul is wired to do what makes it feel good, like an animal. The godly soul is wired to do what's right. That's what it is. That's what defines it. It doesn't have free choice. I have the free choice whether to listen to my animal soul or to my godly soul. That's the trick. No.
What about the soul we get on Shabbos?
The soul we get on Shabbos is in addition to the godly soul. It means our godly soul is it's not really a different soul. You don't have to have another fourth life. It means that your godly soul gets a boost of life. That's why on Shabbos it's much easier if we try to live in a more spiritual way. There's actually a statement in Chazal in the oral Torah in the Talmud that says that there was something called an Am Ha'aretz. Am Ha'aretz means an ignoramus, but it doesn't mean just someone who's not knowledgeable. It means someone who, back in those days, talking about 2,000 years ago, where everyone, knew there wasn't such a thing as Jews were people who kept the Torah. There was no such a concept of a secular Jew and a religious Jew and a reformed Jew. The Jew was a Jew, and all Jews were observant. There was no different ideological levels of observance. People, observe this and that. People, either you did what's right or you didn't do what's right. And a lot of times those that were ignorant, they didn't learn. Many times it wasn't just because of lack of opportunity, because even if those who had lack of opportunity, if they really wanted, they knew who to reach out to and study. It was people that didn't really care. And there are many ideas, aspects of Jewish law that a person, let's say, the Jewish law says we're not allowed to, in Israel, in general, if you keep kosher, hopefully we all do, and you are somewhere in a hick town in southern Illinois or something, you want to keep kosher. So these days, walk in the supermarket, you have many products which have a kosher certification. If you don't have that, let's say you're in India or in Peru or somewhere, you eat fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are always kosher. Yeah, you can't eat fish, you can't eat, not every fish is kosher, not every meat obviously has to be processed in the kosher way. Milk also has to be done in a kosher way, but fruits and vegetables, they grow kosher. However, in Israel,
Bug.
right, most fruits and vegetables, the vegetables are kosher. Some vegetables have infestation of bugs. Bugs are not kosher, but let's say an apple, an orange, a banana is kosher everywhere in the world besides in Israel. That doesn't mean in Israel it's not kosher. In Israel, for the fruit and vegetables to be kosher, we have to separate tithes, a certain percentage which is supposed to be given to the Kohen, to the priests. So, so when you want to buy kosher vegetables in Israel, the store has to have a kosher certification, just like a butcher has to have kosher certification. So Talmud says that now someone has to be the person who we have to trust. People who don't believe in these laws cannot be trusted if they tell you that I did it. You have to be someone that you have to live your life according to these laws, then we could trust you that when you say I separated the tithes or this animal was slaughtered kosherly, you have to know what you're doing and also believe in it. So there's an interesting law. It says that during the rest of the week, a Am someone who's ignorant and someone who doesn't show respect to the laws of the Torah, if he tells you, you could eat these bananas, I separated the tithes, it's kosher bananas, he cannot be trusted. On Shabbat, it says that this Jew can be trusted if he says it on Shabbat. Why is that the case? Because on Shabbat we have, like I said, we have a extra soul. It says that we are given an extra soul, which means our godly soul gets some reinforcement, and it's stronger. And that's why even someone who during the rest of the week has no respect for Judaism, on Shabbat he is assumed to have respect. And if on Shabbat he says it, he is trusted. That means that his godly soul, which he has as a Jew, by being born a Jew, he has that godly soul during the week is on off. On Shabbat it gets a boost, and it gets on. So so we have the three souls. We have the animal soul and the godly soul, the two souls, and we have ourselves, which is the human soul, which makes the decision. That's who was given free choice. In order to have true free choice, you have to be not biased in any way. Yeah, and the intellectual soul has that free choice whether to follow the godly inclination to do good and right, or to follow the animalistic inclination to do what feels good. And obviously we could always help us make the right decisions by thinking about the fact that sin is only sweet in the beginning, but it turns out to be very bitter. Yeah, when we make impulsive choices, many times we enjoy it when we do it, but 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, a year or 2 or 10, we regret. When we make right choices, not always it's easy. We don't always feel that it was worthwhile, but after a while we realize that it was the right thing to do. Think about dieting. Yeah. Everyone wants to pull off a few pounds, right? Who doesn't?
So how do you motivate yourself to do the right thing?
So that's first of all, you have to get to know what's going on inside of you. Know what's flying. You have different thoughts. You're not a schizophrenic person. You're not a split personality. You are a person who has in him a constant battle between two sides. One side is the side that Professor Freud observed. It's very, very selfish. What makes it feel good is very, very lowly matters. And the other side is what Dr. Frankl observed. Is there's a part of us that wants to do what's right. And we have to realize that we don't have to go by the impulses. We have the power of choice in making the right decision. And actually the book of Tanya and the 53 chapters of it gives us many, many strategies. There's the long way and the short way of how we make those choices and we do what's right throughout our life. And so we'll get there. For the meantime, just remember that you can make the choice, or you can think about the fact that that doing what's right is more rewarding in the long run. Doing what feels good is rewarding just while you're doing it. You're not going to feel good about it for much too longer after. It's like eating a big cake. It's very sweet and very exciting, but after you finish the cake, 3 minutes later, you have a big stomachache. So those are the three souls. So the first, that's it. So, and the first chapter of Tanya, which Alter Rebbe begins, give a quick overview. The first page or so actually analyzes a terminology that's used to describe good people, bad people, righteous people and evildoers. So the Hebrew word for a righteous person is a tzaddik. Someone who does evil is called a rasha. And the Alter Rebbe, who wrote the Tanya, that's what I was writing before. He brings 13 different instances where the Talmud and the Medrash, the Torah, uses the terminology tzaddik and rasha, sometimes both in the same sentence, and analyzes what does it mean. Does tzaddik mean someone who, what usually we say is, tzaddik and rasha is innocent or guilty. The person comes up after he lives his life in this world and he's judged in the heavenly court. So usually the way it goes is there's these big scales, and everything we did throughout our lifetime is put on. It's divided to two parts. There's good things that we did and the not good things that we did. One side we put the good things, the other side we put the bad things. If we have 51% good and 49% evil, you go to heaven. If it's the other way around, you have 49% good and 51% evil, you go to the other side. And just to make a point, in Jewish thought, hell is not a permanent place. It's even those who have to go through it, which most people are imperfect, have to go through it. It's not a punishment for sake of punishment. It's actually a cleansing, because the good things that we did, we will get rewarded for, no matter what. In most cases, unless there's only a few instances that a person did so bad that even the good things that he does are not rewarded. But most of us, I would say all of us, we have a mixture of good things and bad things, and the good things that we do are rewarded for. It's just that we cannot imagine someone takes you out to a fancy restaurant, but you didn't manage to get dressed properly, so you feel awkward. You feel, everyone over here is wearing tuxedos and ties and dresses, and I'm in my jeans, my dirty, work shirt. It doesn't feel nice. So that's the purpose, actually, of the purgatory, of the punishment of what's called hell, is that the soul gets cleansed and then it get rewarded for its deeds. And then if it's 50-50, the scales are balanced exactly, like a balanced budget. Right? We don't have that over here in America, not for quite a few years. So if it's exactly on the balance, then that's what's called the Benoni, the middle, the balanced person. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't accept this interpretation based on 12 other statements which seem to suggest otherwise. And we're going to go through them soon. And that, in order to explain what's actually going on over here, what does it mean, a tzaddik or a rasha, a righteous or a not righteous person, and a person who's the middle. For example, one statement that he brings is one of the greatest sages of the Talmud. The name was Rabbi. Rabbi said, I am a Benoni. I'm a person in the middle. I'm not a tzaddik. I'm not a rasha. I'm not evil, and I'm not purely good. I'm a Benoni. And who was this guy? Just to give us an idea of who's the person that's saying this. Actually, it wasn't accepted. His students told him that if you are a Benoni, then What are we? One of the things that are explained in the Tanya later on is that Rabbi made a mistake. He misevaluated himself. He was extra strict, and he misjudged himself. He underestimated himself. He was actually much greater than what he thought he was. But who was he? It says that the angel of death is God's messenger when it comes to time to take someone's life after he fulfills his mission on earth. So the angel of death could only catch someone who is not totally devoted to godliness, but someone who is totally involved in studying Torah, doing God's will. His life can never be taken. So it says that Rabbi was someone who studied the entire day. His mouth never stopped studying and saying holy words, that the angel of death was not able to do anything to him. So, and he's saying that I'm not a tzaddik. So if he's not a tzaddik, who is a tzaddik? What are we? And in order to explain this answer, the answer is not given in chapter 1, it's given in chapter 14. I think. Many chapters down. The Alter Rebbe gives an answer, but in order to understand the answer, he brings in the concept of the two souls. So let's talk a little bit about the animalistic soul. The reason why we talk about it first is because we feel it more often, and the reason why we feel it more often is because we're born with it. Our godly soul only takes effect at a later stage in our life. It says that the godly soul, when it comes to a woman, when she gets her Jewish name, is when her godly soul enters her. The animal soul, obviously, is when you're born. Second you're born, you're alive. That's that soul. That's the animalistic soul. It's the desire to survive. That's the animal soul that we get the moment we're born. The godly soul, so by a girl, enters in a very partially begins when a Jewish girl gets her Jewish name. By a boy, it's at the bris, at his circumcision, and it only comes in completely at when the boy becomes a bar mitzvah and the girl becomes a bat mitzvah at the age of 12, and by boys at the age of 13. Do we become fully responsible adults, which means that we are now given the ability to choose between good and evil. Till now, it wasn't really much of a choice. It was more a matter of education, more our parents' responsibility. Bar mitzvah means it's your own responsibility. Now you're a full person. Go out and make your own choices, and make the right ones. So we are more familiar with the animal soul, but it's worthwhile to analyze it a bit. That we shouldn't think that the word rasha, which means evildoer, means someone who enjoys to murder and to steal and to do bad things, and he enjoys to see other people suffering. That's not what a rasha means. A rasha means someone who puts himself before others. Now, I don't know how many of us could say that we could say about ourselves that we always put others before ourselves. We try. There are some people who are very close to us and we put them before ourselves in some cases. But ultimately, we usually put ourselves before others. That's what it means to be a rasha. Someone who's a tzaddik is someone that puts God and other people, the needs of others, before his own. And he doesn't feel bad about it. That's his nature. And someone who never puts himself before others, but he always wants to put himself before others, and he overcomes that urge, that's a Beinoni. And the book, the Tanya, is called, if you look at the title page, it's called Likutei Amarim, a compilation of teachings. And another name that it has is Tanya, which is the first word of the book. And another name is Sefer Shel Beinoni, the book of the Beinonim. The book teaches us to make choices, to make right choices. A tzaddik doesn't have to make right choices because he worked on himself to the point that naturally he makes the right choices. A rasha is where we all start out, someone who doesn't always make the right choices, doesn't need a book to teach him how to do that. And the reason the rasha needs the book of the Beinonim, the book of the middle person who's in a constant battle, and he never fails to make the right choices, but every choice is a battle. And Tanya gives us strategies of how to make it easier to make those choices in different aspects, like I mentioned before. But that's what the book is about. So let's talk a little bit about the animal soul. The animal soul is Mr. Selfish. That's pretty much what it is. It doesn't necessarily mean someone that enjoys to see other people suffering and to inflict pain and suffering on others. It's someone that enjoys to survive. And one of the points that the Alter Rebbe discusses over here in the first chapter is that this person, with the animal soul, is made up of 4 different elements. Just a short note about the elements. The 4 elements that he brings are air, let's start with fire, water, air, and earth, which that's the way they're called in Hebrew. If you use the more element terminology, it's heat, moisture, space, and heaviness or substance. Everything in the world is made of these 4 elements in different variations. Now science discovered that even the 4 elements are made out of atoms, which is actually all the same, and it's just. But these 4 elements are not only exist physically in matter and material, they also exist spiritually. Our soul is made of these 4 elements: of moisture, of fire, of heat, of air, of space, and of heaviness, of materialism, of something that pulls us down. Our godly soul as well as our animal soul. We're talking about animal soul now. So our animal soul is Mr. Selfish. And selfishness expresses itself in 4 general ways. The first one is heat, fire. The nature of fire is it always goes up, it consumes. Fire is never calm, and that's the concept of where it expresses itself. Now, if you're a mensch, it's called, you're a decent human being, so your need to feel respect and to feel dignity will not override someone else's. You understand that you respect me, I respect you. Sometimes we meet very arrogant people, and that means that they don't know how to really control their Now we all deep down know that we could become arrogant. We could put ourselves before others. We could put other people down to make us feel important. But hopefully we control that. We keep that only in our mind and we don't say it. Definitely don't do it. But you see someone who's very, very arrogant, or you see someone that has a very, very hard time with controlling his anger, his temper. It comes from the same place. That's fire. It rages. I have to be higher. If anyone gets in my way, I'm gonna throw him out of the way. I see people driving sometimes, and you just say, "Okay, I better move to the side of the road." He's in a rush. He has to go to his doctor. He has to watch the game, whatever it is, and he's in a rush. And it doesn't matter that you're in the way. If you're in the way, he'll get you out of the way. So start to stay away from such a person. That's the element of fire in our animal soul. The element of I come before everything and everyone else. I have to be higher than everyone. Everyone is here for me. I don't respect you. And the positive aspect of this, the reason why God gave it to us, God wouldn't give us something which is totally evil and destructive. God gives us things that we could use that are beneficial, but obviously to make it give us free choice, they also have a negative element to them. The positive side of this feeling that could translate to arrogance is dignity. People deserve and want, and it's nothing wrong with wanting that people should respect you for who you are, for a human being. You don't want to be stepped on. You don't want to be looked down on. That's nothing wrong with wanting to be respected. That's a very, very, very basic need of a person. In giving tzedakah, when you give charity to poor people, there's a very important. There's different levels of how you can give tzedakah. One of the most important, the better ways is what's called matan b'seiser, to give it in secret, because that way you retain the poor man's dignity. But if you don't know who you gave it to, and the poor person doesn't know who he received it from, that helps him retain his dignity, that although he's needy and he cannot support himself, he doesn't have to feel that this is the person that helped me, and definitely you don't have to see this is the person who I helped, and he's lower than me, I'm rich and he's poor. You give the person the help that he needs without making him feel uncomfortable about it, which you never need. But even if we do, we definitely all understand that when we are helped with dignity, we appreciate it much more. A person likes dignity. The second element is water, moisture. What water does, it makes everything. Water makes plants grow. Plants make animals and other things grow. We enjoy food. We enjoy everything. Needs water to survive. That water makes things sticky, makes things pleasurable. Water creates pleasure, and we have all different pleasures that we have. We have a pleasure that we have from food. We have a pleasure which is associated to procreating. It's okay. You don't have to eat rocks and dry bread. You're allowed to eat good food. We're allowed to live in a nice house. We're allowed to enjoy life. There's no sin enjoying life. It's not a Jewish ideal to abstain from worldly pleasures. The Jewish ideal is to use them in the right way. To abstain is not a Jewish ideal, and our animal soul likes to enjoy. And the reason why God gave us that pleasure in food and that pleasure in procreating is because He wants us to be alive, so we can do what we have to do in the world. He wants there to be a continuation to humanity. That's why we have these things in us, the desire for pleasures. If we use it right, if our animal soul is in control, we'll use it in the right measure. We're not going to eat just for the sake of pleasure. We'll eat what's healthy, we'll eat what we need, and we'll have a good time also. But we don't eat because it makes us feel good. When it's let loose, this animal soul, just like when it's let loose, the dignity is let loose, it creates arrogance and anger. When pleasure is let loose, it creates the person becomes very, very called hedonistic. Is that the word for it?
Hedonistic.
Hedonistic.
Correct, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That life is all about eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you're gonna die, which is not a very Jewish ideal, not at all.
That's where the Epicurus came from.
That's exactly.
Epicurus.
Yes.
Epicurus.
Remember, was it 2 years ago? There was an ad in one of the Jewish papers over here. A new bakery opened up, and they wrote that come treat your Epicurean taste buds. So for the next 3 or 4 weeks, there's many angry letters to the editor after you let such an ad that's promoting such an ideal. We're allowed to eat good cookies, but not because they taste good. You eat them because you need to live, and you need to sometimes have on Shabbos. It's also a mitzvah to actually have nice food. You want to make people that come visit you feel good. You give them nice food, but it shouldn't become an ideal. Ruach, wind, air, space. It's just the concept of letting go, of just being laid back and having a good time. It's okay to relax once in a while, sit down, to read a book, to spend time with friends. It's not a sin. But if it becomes, again, more than necessary, that you just sit down and you jest and you joke around, and without there's no concept that I came to this world for a reason. It's just I came to the world to have a good time. Then that's very negative.
It should be in moderation. No.
That's the trick, and following the godly soul gives the proper moderation. So that translates in hoilulus, in being frivolous and not being serious. The person is allowed to say a joke, allowed to enjoy, allowed to maybe watch a comedy. It's all right, but that shouldn't be an ideal, and this is not the way to live. It's something that you need once in a while to relax. If a person is going to just go to concerts from all day, all night, all week, and the whole year, you won't accomplish anything. You're not going to make money. You're not going to have money to support it. And definitely not going to accomplish anything in your spiritual life. And the final element, which is the element of earth, of dust, which is very heavy and doesn't flow. Water flows. The idea of pleasure is that I flow towards something. I have a desire. this is the one which is most of it is negative. You have to use it in very very little of it. Is the concept of afar, of dust, of just staying where you are, not moving. Now, a person has to have steadiness in his life. It's true, but a person cannot use the steadiness as an excuse never to grow. Depression, heaviness, laziness comes from this. Laziness is one thing that there's probably nothing positive to it. The concept of that I want to stay in one place, I want to take it easy, I want to be steady is okay, but you have to also keep growing at the same time. So laziness, depression, heaviness is from the element of earth, of dust, which is the lowest and probably there's the least benefit in that element that we have in us. And that's the animal soul in a bite. Pretty much everything that we do and want and we don't do, and we're lazy, it all comes from these four elements. That's the animal soul. Now the animal soul is not within everyone to get rid of, the reach of everyone to get rid of. We have to keep it, we have to use it. Someone who serves God properly means he controls it. Whether it's in pleasures, whether it's in relaxing, whether it's in feeling dignified. If the godly soul follows the laws of the Torah and the ethics of the Torah, we could use all these things in the right way. And obviously, we'll take care of ourselves, but we're never going to take care of ourselves on the other's expense. There is actually a law in the Torah that says that if you're stuck in the desert and you have one bottle of water, you and a friend are in the desert, what should you do? The water isn't enough. If you're going to drink the bottle, you're going to survive. If you both drink it, both of you won't survive. Yeah. Not a simple dilemma. The halacha is drink it. Your life comes first. The Torah does not expect a human being, if the case is that you both could save your life, just you'll have more water and you'll feel a little better, and your friend will die. The Torah does not allow that. If it's the case is that if you divide it, you both will make it. Your life comes first. Chayecha koidmin. And the reason for that is because that's who we are. The Torah does not, God created us that way, that we come first. But not in a way, I come first and I'm going to step at everyone in my way. I have to take care of myself. However, take care of myself doesn't require for me to abuse someone else. If I have to abuse someone else to take care of myself, that means that you're letting your animal control. You're not following the way of the Torah, the laws of the Torah. Yeah.
Since you brought up the water, do you know how long it is the human body could go without water and how much water one needs?
It probably depends on where you are. If you're in the Sahara Desert, probably it's different than if you're in Central Park. And it depends probably who you are also. That's
it's a very hard calculation to know.
You have to call a rabbi when you're stuck in the desert.
Cell phone,
or you
but
could call 911 and they'll send you some more water. But I guess whatever the evaluation is, I'm not sure. I hope we never have to answer that question to ourselves.
Probably never happen anyway.
No, but I mean, the Holocaust is actually a book. It's a series of books. It's called Shus Mimamakim. There's a rabbi, actually, Rabbi Oshri. He's 17. His father was a rabbi in the Kovna ghetto in Lithuania, and he had many very, very painful questions. He was asked as a rabbi during the years of the war, the Holocaust, and similar questions like this. Could I take my child out of the list? And they're going to put someone else instead, but they may anyway put someone else instead. It's like a lot of such dilemmas came up, and we hope that we never have to deal with such questions ever again, which should come immediately. But one last point that is actually quite surprising, but it is mentioned here, is usually Jewish people are known to be very generous. Jews in America, which we're talking about 60, 70 years ago, which were well-to-do, more than Jews almost anywhere else in the world, were very, very generous. Not everyone kept Shabbos and ate kosher and led a religious life, but there was one mitzvah that they did very, very generously, the mitzvah of tzedakah, of charity, of helping their brethren in Europe, and politically and financially, in all different ways. So, where does this come from? Why is it that we have Jews that don't keep Shabbos, don't put on tefillin, don't keep kosher, but they're ready to give $1 million to help Jews who they never met somewhere in the Pale of Settlement in Russia? What's the explanation for that? So that there's a Jewish animal soul. It's not a religious thing. When a Jew gives tzedakah, he doesn't always do it as a religious obligation. Because if he would, there was many easier mitzvahs. It's much easier to buy a pair of tefillin for $500 and put it on for 5 minutes a day than to give $1 million to tzedakah. We're not talking about just only big million. Not everyone was Rockefellers. Jews gave in the appeals. Everyone gave their $18. People shared and they gave money. The reason why Jews have this nature that they give tzedakah, that they like to be kind, it doesn't come from the godly soul. It comes from the animal soul. A Jewish animal soul does not enjoy to see someone suffering. And when it sees and knows of someone, a fellow Jew who's in pain, not just a Jew, but anyone who's in pain, we know the Jews are always part of the civil rights movements. They're very active. That's actually a very Jewish trait, and it's not a religious aspect. It's not the Jew following the Torah, it's a Jew following his inclination. Just like animal soul makes me want to eat good food, it makes me want to wear a nice suit and drive a nice car, it makes me, when I see someone in pain, it makes me want to help him. And what it means to do it, now this is a general, there's nothing wrong with it, it's a great thing to do. And here you shouldn't do it moderately, you should do it generously, do it a lot. But however, it's important to remember what the purpose is. And the Alter Rebbe ends off this chapter with a very, very disturbing statement. He says that the animal soul, and he explains based on Kabbalistic reasons that the Jewish animal soul comes from a aspect where there's a mixture of good and evil. That's why it comes with a lot of selfishness, obviously, and also it comes from a place that there's the aspect that I can't see people suffering. That's the good that's mixed in the evil, which we'll discuss later on. This concept of good and evil in not only in us and everything else in the world. But he makes a statement that Gentiles, non-Jews, their souls come from a place which is totally evil. There's no good. A Gentile will never, only time he will give charity is if he will get respect from it. He will get honor. He has to have an ulterior motive. He will never give and share just for the sake of sharing and helping someone. There has to be always an ulterior motive. Now there are something called the righteous Gentiles. Just to bring out this aspect. I'm not sure who it was that said it, but it says that the problem of the Holocaust was not Hitler, it was the fact that there was a whole world that let him do what he did. Not everyone went around shooting Jews and gassing Jews, but the concept that there was a whole world that let it happen. 6 million died and the world was quiet, like the saying goes. If the whole world was Jewish, that wouldn't happen. There's a Jewish nature that we can't see someone suffering and not help him. And when there is righteous Gentiles, not every Gentile is that way. There are righteous Gentiles, non-Jews who do have that. That's a special type of soul. And actually every Gentile could grow to that point. They all have that aspect. But the fact is that as history proved it, in all different aspects, well, not every goy, so to say, was going around killing Jews, but when Jews were being killed, in many instances, they just let it happen. Even people which were civilized and advanced. And just to end, and they say that the Alter Rebbe was put in prison by his adversaries. He was slandered on. So one of the points that they brought was fellow Jews that they wanted to get him in trouble is that look what he writes in his book. He says that all you guys are evil. So he was questioned by a commission, a royal commission. And one of the questions was, how come you write such a thing? So it was the last question. And he answered actually 21 questions, which are all, actually I just translated a few months ago, the Alter Rebbe's a testimony. So he answered many of the questions. This question is not written down, and the way the story goes is that when he was asked this question, he gave a smile, and they accepted it. Because all the other questions he answered very well. And he was kind of telling them, do you really want me to prove it to you that you guys are such beasts? And you really have no good in you? Just, we'll keep it at that. And they accepted it. They did not wish to be confronted with the reality. And these people, they were such people that when Jews were suffering, no one cared, no one did anything about it. This point of Tanya remains to be a point of content. Many people, how can you say that? So it's just, I'll end with a story that brings out the point. A couple of years ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke in the UN, and either during or after the speech, he mentioned that he was by the Lubavitcher Rebbe many years, 25, probably more over 30 years before. This happened, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And the Rebbe told him he was then an ambassador to the UN. He visited the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him the UN is a house of lies, and that your job is to be a candle, which will. I don't know how the UN. Just if anyone needs a proof how the world, that most Gentiles out there don't have that sense of fairness and goodness, especially when it comes to Jews. Is look how it's the Security Council, how many resolutions they have, and it seems that Israel is the worst state in the world, and you have people in Syria and Iraq, but Israel is the source of all evil. That's what makes it look.
According to the UN. According to the UN.
According to the UN, but the UN represents governments. The governments represent people. So he spoke at the UN and he mentioned this story that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told me, that I'm coming to a house of darkness and my job is to shine a light. He was talking about the different anti-Israel resolutions. So Ismail Hanaya, may God obliterate his name. He was, I think, the Prime Minister of the Hamas. I think he was just switched not long ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. His response to what Mr. Netanyahu said was, this is how he responded. This is reported. I remember reading the article. It was an eye-opening moment. He said, the Lubavitcher rabbi's great-grandfather is a racist because he writes in the Tanya that I guess he knew somehow, he found out. He writes in the Tanya that Gentiles are completely evil. So if anyone needed to prove the point further, is Mr. Hania, the murderer, who kills his own people just in order to kill Jews, is talking about the racism of the Tanya. It says in the Tanya that just brought out that point. And again, it is important to point out that it doesn't mean that every guy out there in the street who's not Jewish is evil. There is a concept of righteous Gentiles, and actually the time that we're living in is much better in that area. The Rebbe told us that we're very close to the time of Mashiach. Where Mashiach is not just that God will take the Jews out of exile and He'll dump the rest of the world. No, Mashiach will elevate the rest of the world. The rest of the world will become righteous. And as we get closer, there's more and more. There's many, many more. There are plenty of righteous Gentiles out there, much more than previous periods in history. Today, there are many Gentiles that will stand up and defend a Jew and help a Jew, and especially in America, and which is the Rebbe called it a kingdom of kindness, a kingdom which is good to the Jews, and help not only allows Jews to practice their religion and to live in safety, it also encourages and helps. So there are many Gentiles who are living a divine life. The concept, the ideas of Kabbalah and Hasidus are not just for Jews; they're for everyone. And we see many, many Gentiles who make use of it, and they upgrade themselves to the point that they become righteous Gentiles. That their soul is not just evil. Even the animal soul has in it goodness. That's just a sign that we're much, much closer to Mashiach, closer than ever before. So Tanya is not, it's not a racist book, God forbid. It's just describing the situation the way it was then.